morning, folks. Hey, Miles. I got your email, and I'll send you that verification right after class. Unless I already sent it, but if I didn't, I have it, and I'll do it. Okay. There we go. So, last time we were talking about Chapter 4. And we had made it through, I think, just padding, I believe, was the last thing. Okay. So we're going to move on to some new ideas here. And we're finally going to learn how to include images on our web page using HTML and CSS. See if I can make this any bigger. There we go. Oops. Okay. So as always, I'm going to create a demo for this, and you guys can just copy the link if you need, or I usually post it somewhere. I should be posting these in the comments of the video. That would be useful. Okay. So here's HTML chapter 4 part 2. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of the script tag and the script file. Alright, and I'm going to give myself some more space here. And we'll just use embedded CSS, so we only need the HTML file. Okay. So you guys can check out the previous video if you need a refresher on what we've covered so far in Chapter 4. Otherwise, we're going to move on, and we need to talk about... Oh, I forgot. In case you were wondering from the last video, spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen the previous video, skip this part. Well, does anyone know what the error was here? Can anyone point out what the error was in this code? Now remember, if you get an error in your code or it's not working in CSS and HTML, you can use the validators. Whoops, we're doing CSS validator for this. We can do direct input, and that'll let us paste code right in there. And if we check that, it says, oops, one error. It says missing a semicolon before the property name border top. And so here it shows they've inserted it here. So it's saying inside of the H2 rule, line 2, so 1, 2. We were just missing this semicolon here, okay? And that would have rendered the rest of the CSS after this missing semicolon void, so it wouldn't do anything. Unfortunately, that's what happens with CSS. If you make mistakes, it doesn't give you an error, it just doesn't show up correctly. So that's why the validator is useful. Okay. And it will remain useful as long as you use CSS, which we will be doing for the rest of this course. Okay. So we're going to talk about images on the web. I feel like I went on a rant before about the difference between vector and raster graphics when we were talking about drawing things with CSS. Well, we're going to focus now, how do we include some raster images on our web page? So that is probably what you're used to seeing, just a photograph or an illustration, any kind of digital art that isn't generated through a formula. So it's just pixels or, yeah, basically it's represented in pixels. So, you know, we're going to use these three in the class. I don't expect you to know the difference between them. You just need to know that these three file types, GIF, JPG, and PNG, all represent image file types that you can use on a web page. All right, and this one here, GIF, what has some some controversy around it. So anyone that's in the chat here, if you want to discuss how you like to pronounce this, and if you're not aware of the controversy, GIF, how do you, if you weren't told, how do you think you would pronounce a word spelled GIF? All right, so I think so. Most people, nobody uses the names of file types when they talk, or at least not commonly. And so if you encounter this, you're gonna think, you know, pronounce it GIF. But the creator of the format, for whatever reason or purpose, says that it's pronounced GIF. And so you can find really good arguments for both sides, where people have spent a lot of time analyzing why it should be pronounced one way or the other. So I think GIF is in the large majority because the G stands for graphics, and so people are confused as to why it makes the J sound. But and then people on the other side argue, if you create something, you get to decide how it's pronounced. But that's not really how language works. Okay? If you go back in the history of American English and try to read something from 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you're not going to understand what the heck they're talking about. So language just changes as people use it. So it's kind of a moot point to argue, except for the fact that when you're communicating, especially in a professional environment, with clients or employers or fellow employees, and you need to communicate an idea, it's useful to have an agreement on how things are pronounced and spelled and used. So this will not be the last. It's not the first, and it will not be the last controversy regarding pronunciation for something that really was never supposed to be pronounced by humans anyway. So, anyway, the other two have, just boring backstories. And then for my, my own basic knowledge of these three formats, this is probably going to be the most familiar because it's gained a lot of familiarity through social media, and GIF files can contain multiple frames or layers, and basically they can be animated, so they're very popular. JPG, I believe, can have a higher resolution and a smaller size. Don't quote me on that. Let's see, it might say in here. Okay, so yeah, and then PNG has the ability to save transparency. So you cannot have transparency in the other two, that at least when this book has been written, since when this book has been written. So we've got animation. For what we're using in this class, you can use the three interchangeably, or not interchangeably, but you can use any three of these file types. They will serve any purpose we need for this class. GIF, if you need some animation, you would use that one. If you want really detailed and high quality photographs, JPG, also called JPEG. And then the PNG allows you to use transparency in the image. So it's good for stacking different images together, say like sprites, or any kind of image, so sprites for a game or for some sort of, I don't know, you could use them for anything. Anything. Or anyway, this one's also, some people pronounce this ping. People don't usually talk about this all that often, but you'll see people talk about GIF on a daily basis now because of its use in social media. Anyway, if anyone has anything to add to those, let me know. All right, but really, remember, all I want you to know is these are the three file types that you'll be using. All right, so how do I actually include this on the page? I know a lot of people were having difficulty getting images to show up on Replit. I can't remember if I included that in any video or anything, so we're going to go over that today. So the way you include an image on a web page using HTML is by adding an IMG tag. And why didn't they just spell it out as image, right? Well, back in the day, saving 2 letters in a file could make the difference between it being too fast enough or too slow. So we'll just copy this over into Replit. And where do you think it should go? Well, the image is going to show up on the page, so we need to put it in the body. All right. And this is something that is difficult to figure out on your own, so I'll say it now. If you copy text out of Microsoft Office products, I know PowerPoint for sure, but it probably is Word and Excel as well. Microsoft Word is a word processor, and so that might not actually pertain to anything, but you notice, look at this, look at the double quotes here. So I copied this out of PowerPoint. Okay, there's a left facing and a right facing double quote here. Those are important for Word and PowerPoint. For some reason, they decided to make sure you have those. Maybe that way you can see where they open and close more easily, or which way they're trying to open or close to. All right, but they are two different distinct characters. Now in the Replit text editor, and pretty much any text editor, if you type a double quote, it looks like this. So you can tell, maybe, let's see, I can zoom in a little bit. Let's zoom in. There we go. Let's really see this. Okay, so here's a double quote in the text editor. Here's a double quote from Microsoft Office. The text editor does not know what these are, and it will cause problems for you. So if you do copy out of Microsoft Office, make sure you change the double quotes. So you can do it this way, where you just go in and do that. Or if you like shortcuts, Replit has an awesome one. All right. If I select something and then hit, so I'm going to select the left double quote and I hit Control Shift F12. What was it, Scott, for selecting everything of the same in Replit? F2. Sorry, not F12. Control Shift F2, or just Control F2? Yeah, Control. All right, Control F2. I'm still learning this one, so it's pretty useful though. You'll notice it's highlighted all of the matches it found for my selection, so I can quickly select all the left-facing double quotes and just type a normal double quote. Unfortunately, actually, I would delete it first, so hit backspace and then put a double quote. Okay, and then you can do the same thing for the right facing. So I can hit select it. So you can see, I'll zoom in here. Okay, so you select it first, and then you hit Control F2, and now all of the right facing ones are selected. Not only are they selected, but it actually adds the blinking vertical line, which I'm sure has a name. It adds one at each point, so whatever you type, it's going to show up in all of those places. So I can just hit backspace, put in the double quotes, and then this is important. You know, this is useful because you'll notice images can have a lot of, well, any element can have a lot of properties, but here with images, this one comes with, at least in this example, quite a few. And we're going to talk about those next. All right, but let's get it working first. So first step, you know, write the code. And then when you run it, we see this. So take a, yeah, I'm sure you've seen this before. Take a look at this. What does this mean? What do you think this means? Because the computer's trying to help us when it shows us things like this. It's saying, you know what, I don't think you meant to do this, but I'm just gonna, this is my fallback. So what this means right here, if you see this, and it might be different in each browser, but here in Chrome, this icon represents that the computer cannot find the file at the specified path. So it's saying I can't find, which one of these do you think is the file name of the image? So here's the image tag. That's the element name, right? IMG. And we can see that because it's in blue. What are these again? These ones in purple? I haven't been doing my job of reminding you of the 3 parts of HTML every time, huh? So Miles is right. So this right here is the path to the image. So this is where you have to tell the computer where to find the picture so it can put it on the page. It doesn't know. You know, you could have a ton of pictures in here. It's not going to be able to guess which one. So it's looking for a cake.gif. All right. And so if we look in our files, we have an index.html and a style.css. Neither of those are cake.gif, so it says, well, it's not there, but here, have this consolation prize of a file slashed in half. All right, so how do we get an image on here? You can actually upload any files that you need to Replit. Now, I'm sure it has limited size. Honestly, this is amazing that this tool is free. Rarely do free tools allow you to upload images and basically use every feature. The only feature that you don't get is, I think you do have limited storage, but it's a ridiculous amount for writing code. And you cannot, if you don't pay, you can't set your Replits to private. Okay, so anything that you create, other people could potentially find and use, which, in our case, that's great. Now, if you were doing some sort of proprietary work that would, people aren't supposed to see, then you would need private. But anyway, you don't need to pay for this, and it allows you to upload files. So inside of the file manager here, shows us all of our files and folders. We can add new files. Okay. And I think you guys have already seen that. You can add new folders to hold different files. You can move files around and put folders inside of folders. Okay. It'll help you organize, projects that may have a lot of files. And this third one, and I didn't notice this. It took me forever to notice this. So if you haven't paid attention to and seen this, they maybe need to make it a little more visible. But this gives you additional options. Okay, and maybe I did show this at least. You can actually download all of the files from your Replit as a compressed folder. So if you make something in here and you want to keep a local copy of it, you can hit download as zip, choose a location to save it, it's Tuesday, and then here are all your, you can open that file that you downloaded and it has all your files, and you can put those anywhere you want. Do whatever you need with them, and then let's say you're done and you want to put them back on here. You can do upload a folder. Okay, and then you could go find a folder. See if I have any folders that don't have a million files. Let's not go in there. All right, this is small, so we can upload this. All right, so this will just grab all of the files from that folder and just throw them into your Replit. Right. Okay. Now these can't be the ones I uploaded cannot be opened properly with a text editor. So if I look at them, there's a PDF of the old programming degree. And the old web degree. Alright. And you can also just upload individual files. So for example, say you want to add an image to your page, but you don't have the image on Replit, it won't be able to find it, right? So you can find that file by just uploading it, and then it should be able to access it. Okay. And now, I want to show you guys one way that you could get images. Requires a lot of work though. You can just use Google Images. In any of the exercises, and I think I specified this in the homework, but if I didn't, or if you were confused, please tell me which part you were confused at, and I'll make sure to put some directions on how to fix that. Because you may notice a lot of the stuff that I do in my classes is never not going to be a work in progress. So constantly have to redesign and iteratively improve it until something new comes out and I just have to scrap it all. Anyway, this site allows you to create animated GIFs, among other things. And I don't think I have a picture of a cake on here. So these are all little things that I've made. Yeah, I don't have a cake. So let's make a cake. So this is another free web tool that I really enjoy. It's pretty simple. It may remind you of Microsoft Paint. So let's make a little cake here. Probably need a plate to put the cake on. This is where I'll build the cake. So let's go with some pink frosting. and then we'll throw some kind of icing-ish, lighter icing-ish color. And just because this is a 16 by 16 pixel image, I'm going to put a candle on there because I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell this is a cake. Oh, there we go. I just misaligned those. Deformed cake there for a second. There we go. And let's make the top flat. There we go. Nah, that's not right. The perspective's not right. Okay. We'll add another line here. There we go. And maybe one more. Perfect. That's a cake. Kind of. Close enough, right? Looks weird with these hanging over. There we go. Anyway, you get the idea. Let's give it a candle. Okay. Well, maybe it'll be a stick of dynamite, right? You don't have a lot of detail to work with in a 16 by 16 image. Oops. Okay, and then we need a light. And let's give it some animation. Since we're going to be making this a GIF, how do you do that? So besides layers that you can use here to, well, take a Photoshop class if you want to know why layers are useful. But we can add additional frames here, so we can just copy our cake. So now we have 2 frames, which you can't see anything happening now, but let's move the fire over here, and then we can see the animation of the fire flickering. Let's try moving it over more so it flickers. Okay, and then death. You can see it up here in the preview. It looks a lot better when it's zoomed out. Let me zoom out. No. Okay. Anyway, we've got our cake. Now we can save it. Cake. And this has free online storage. So I'm going to save it to my gallery, but if I want to use it somewhere else, I can just come down here to export on the side. And then it lets you decide how you want to export it. And you may notice here's GIF. I got to be neutral in this argument, so I have to call it GIF, which nobody calls it that. So I get to be hated by both sides. No. Do you want how fast do you want it to go? Do you want how many times do you want it to loop? Once or infinitely? The resolution, yeah, which is, I created it in a 16 by 16 resolution, but it can blow that up. So we're not going to be able to see 16 by 16 pixels on a web page very big. I mean, you can actually just increase it. Let's keep it at 16 and you'll see. All right, and we can download that. Throw it in pictures. Okay. Okay. Now we have our picture. So for you, getting a picture, you could just simply use Google Images. But if you like pixel, I really like pixel art, so I just like to show that tool. And plus, if you do any kind of web design or web development for a project on your own, it's a lot more impressive if you can do each, show an example of each thing, each of your skills applied together. Shows that you're more rounded skill-wise. So now I can upload that cake. So remember, if I run this now, no file, but as soon as I upload a file called cake.gif, or upload a different file and rename it cake.gif, then that will show up on the page. And it looks like it doesn't. Oh, I know what's happening. Okay, so there it is. Super blurry, because what's happening is, oh wow, it doesn't actually look that bad on the video. Anyway, I'll tell you, on mine it's super blurry. The browser is trying to soften the jagged edges. I wonder if you could turn that off. Anyway, it's because we're setting the height and the width of the image to 100, but it's only supposed to be 16 in the native image. So when you blow pictures up, they lose a lot of clarity. So if I shrink it back down to 16 by 16, then we have that there. Now we have our cake. I can't really see 16 by 16, so we could use height 32. Don't forget to give it a 32 what, right? Pixels is what we want. 32px. Right. Oh, there we go. We got a cake. You can include other images just by adding another element. We'll call this one corny, because I have another one I downloaded of a dancing cob of corn that I made. I was inspired by my drive to work and the endless fields of corn which I don't think we eat actually, but I'm not sure. If anyone here grows corn on a farm, let me know what it's for. Is it just fuel or animal feed or what? Also, Illinois is known for corn. I mean, I think Iowa is too, but you travel outside of Illinois and you tell people you're from Illinois, you're basically telling them you're from Chicago. But I've been to Chicago maybe less than a dozen times, and there's a funny map. See if I can find it. See if you've seen this. I think I'm being too specific. Here we go. Here it is. So, if you tell anyone that isn't from Illinois that you live in Illinois, now this probably doesn't count in the surrounding states if people have been to Illinois, but if you go to the East Coast or the West Coast and you tell them you're from Illinois, you might as well just tell them you're from Chicago. This is the truth. This is what we know to be the truth. And then on the left, if you live in Chicago, everything down, the rest of Illinois is just cornfields to them. So I want to save this so I don't have to find it next time. Let me know if you've seen that before. When you're saving images, you don't have to use the provided name. So if you use Google Images to get an image for a web page, here it's saying, okay, you want to save this as Z2-700 by 560. Now what I'm guessing is the site we pulled this from uses software to automatically build the site, and so it uses a name labeling system to keep track of the images. So someone probably did not hard code this name, and it's terrible for a human to read this. I don't know what I'm looking at, so I'm going to rename it to Funny Illinois Map. And it's a JPEG. So we're getting to see all those formats today. Alright, so got corny, got the cake, those are both GIF files. Let's put our Illinois map. Okay. Which is a JPG, so don't forget, you have to tell it the name, including the dot and the 3 letters afterwards, or how many ever letters there are. Does anyone know what this is? The dot at the end of a file name with these characters? So this is called a file extension. It's part of the name, and it, at least I can say this for sure, in Windows, you can associate certain file extensions to be opened by certain software. Now, if you use Windows, it's going to basically do this on its own, but we've been naming HTML files and CSS files with different file extensions but you can open them both in any text editor and you're going to see the code. So what's stored in a HTML file and a CSS file is stored the same way, just as characters, but it's used differently. Okay. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay, so we've got the dancing corn, a cake, and our map of Illinois here. They're all really small because we set the height and width here. And so this is, you can avoid having to use CSS to adjust your image sizes by using these attributes. Okay. The other thing is, what is this? ALT. All right. Well, let's create another one here, another image on the page. And let's say we don't have the image yet, so we put something there, and when we do that, we know it's going to hide the, or it's not going to show, it'll show this icon, right? But what does it show? Okay, so it says birthday cake right now. I changed this alt value to hello, and now it says hello here. So think about, what do you think this is for? It actually has quite a few uses. And what if I don't include it? Let's take it away from the Illinois map. Let's take it away from Corny. Are they still going to work? Yeah, they are. And if I take it away from this image that we don't have, nothing is going to show up. Okay, so one use of this, which is becoming less prevalent, is there are still browsers in use that cannot load images. Okay, and I guess this ties into the next part. So, you know, in the past, before we had smartphones, we had phones that could load web pages with limited capabilities. It was a very dark time and a nightmare to use the internet with your phone, so no one did, really. But since you couldn't load images on the browser in the beginning, it would just skip over the images unless they had an alt value. So what the alt value is an alternative to the image. So it should be a brief and succinct definition of whatever the picture is trying to convey. All right, so this map of Illinois as described to these three people, do you think an alt value of map would be sufficient? So if someone loads this on a web page, I'm sorry, loads this in a browser that cannot view images, it'll just put the word map where the image is supposed to be. This is a really hard part of web design for people to care about, because it's an extra step that doesn't benefit the majority of people. But the reason I make a big deal about it is, besides old cell phone browsers, there's another type of browser that blind people use and visually impaired people called a screen reader. And sometimes it's just a plugin for an existing browser. But what it does is it processes the HTML code and pulls out information that is read to the person. All right. And we had, I've had a few students who use those, and it was just so fascinating to see how someone who can't see uses the internet, because they still can. It's just, if everything on the internet is designed for people who can see, it just makes it harder for them. All right. So, besides just showing up on the page if you can't load the image, screen reader software looks for alt values of images and says, here, there's an image, here's what it is, and then it moves on. So if it just says map, you may as well not even, I guess it's better than nothing for them to know that there is a map there, not that they'll ever know what it's a map of unless they ask someone else. So it might be better to put Illinois joke map. That's a little bit more detail. All right. What you don't want to do is write a whole essay in here. You just want to be brief and specific at the same time. So you have to kind of go between. All right. So that being said, if if an exercise asks you to use images, please provide an alt value that you think is appropriate. Okay, I'm not gonna nitpick on the values you use there, but it's a good idea to use it and to understand why you're doing it. Now, from a business standpoint and a legal standpoint, I believe and I'm having deja vu right now, like I've already talked about this, but university, I think state universities, let's see, you know what, I always talk about it, but I never look it up. Who legally has to make their websites accessible? Oh. Here we go. Okay. So it says, in the US, this is from January of 2019, so in terms of the law, that might be recent, but in terms of technology, it may not. Technology moves a little bit faster than the law. Unfortunately, that leads to a lot of issues. But I don't know. I don't know how to streamline it any better than it is anyway. Okay. It says any website that isn't a federal, state, or local government website. So I think state universities fall under that, but they can be sued and fined for not having accessible websites. So there's a set of rules that you have to follow. And so from a business standpoint, what does that actually represent? What do you think? It's important to understand why we're doing things the way we're doing them. There's not much point in me showing you things without any kind of a context, like, giving you definitions of things and then you memorizing those and then repeating them back to me without me ever telling you why. That wouldn't be a very good use of time. Okay, so from a business standpoint, making your website compliant, it is an increased cost for sure, because you have to weigh whether getting fined or spending that money to make your, if you already have, let's say you spend millions of dollars on your website, and then the law was added, and this is probably why it's not a law for businesses yet. You come to your own conclusion on that, but it represents, cost. So if you spend all this money, you're going to have to spend it again to go back through and fix it. Just a lot of money to avoid the legal trouble. All right. It's not an easy task. Okay. If you're building a new website, it's not that hard to add it in the beginning, but to go back and do it, it's a lot of work. All right. It also represents a business opportunity, because if your website is more accessible, you'll be able to reach more people. So if there were two competing stores with websites and one of them was more easily navigated by screen readers, they're going to get basically the business of anyone who uses a screen reader. And so it may justify the cost. Maybe they can justify the cost that way. Now, if you look at very large websites that sell online, like Walmart and Rural King and Amazon, and there's a lot of them. Some of them have already gone ahead and made their websites accessible, because the amount of people that will increase, their audience justifies the cost. So there are going to be sites that aren't government sites that are accessible to. But if you are a small business and you just want to make a website, you're probably not going to spend a lot of money getting someone who's going to do it properly, or if you're making it yourself, you probably don't even realize it's a thing unless you know someone who uses the internet with a screen reader. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. All right. So I think I talked for like an hour and a half on one slide here. But we covered pretty much everything that I wanted to. I will say there is an exercise in Chapter 4, and if you need more time to finish Chapter 4, or let's say you turned it in but you didn't do all the parts, you take some time and go ahead and fix that. Just make sure that if you fix it or turn it in after the due date, that you just message me so I know to go back and look at it. All right, so in one of the exercises, it's not described very well. It's kind of vague in what it wants you to do, but it asks you to good question, Miles. I'll look at the due dates, and I've just been adjusting them based on how many people have been getting things done and what kind of things people are getting stuck on. Since this is the first full semester where we're using this modality, a lot of the issues that I can solve in the classroom are taking a little bit more time, so I'm being a lot more lenient on the due dates. So if just our goal is just to make sure we get through everything, so I can't adjust the due dates. Basically, I can't adjust the due dates past the turn-in for final grades, and if you need more time, and I'm not talking just about you, Miles, but if anybody needs more time, all you have to do is talk to me. And if you haven't contacted me yet about anything, please do. I miss seeing the students in person, so opening a line of communication to me allows me to help you better. But yeah, just follow the listed due dates for now. If they seem like the material that we're covering, I think we're behind the due dates right now with this material, but I'll just adjust the due dates to fit it later. So don't worry about it on that end. And I'm not going to take any points off if something was due before we talked about it. I have 3 sections of this class, and editing all the due dates is not a small task, so I tend to try to do it all at once. Anyway, that's a very good question, so hopefully that answered a bit for you. All right. What next here? I think we only have a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and, if anyone needs to go, because I think our class is over at 10:45. Of course, these are optional anyway, but you can go. It won't affect your grade or anything, but I think I might just go ahead and finish through this chapter 4 material so that we don't have to do another video on it and we can get caught back up. So there's not that much more, though, that using images in CSS is a little complicated. I'll go over that in this video. So all right. So we basically looked at all we need to know about how to use images in HTML. We know how to add them to the page. We have to use the SRC attribute. So you're not going to have an image tag in this class that doesn't have an SRC attribute with a value. Okay, right? We have, this is the image tag. Notice it's a standalone tag. I didn't say that earlier, but at this point it should be obvious. There's only one. There's no closing tag. It's an IMG element, image element, with one image tag, and it always is going to contain the SRC attribute with a value. These other ones are optional. Okay, so if you don't have these, it's not going to. It's still going to have the image. It's just smaller now because I took away the size, the height and width. All right, pretty simple. A lot of parts put together, but basic, simple idea. Now let's look at images in CSS. All right, so images that we put in HTML can be interacted with directly. So if I select and drag an image here from a web page, I can, I don't know if it's going to let me put it in here. Nah. I can save that to my desktop or into a folder. I can right click on it to get some, save it that way or copy it. But you can interact with it basically, and it interacts with the elements on the page, right? So I guess I should have shown this. Put some text between the images. Also notice the images are all going on the same line. So what does that mean? Okay. So if you just throw some text in there, or maybe if I put a paragraph here, you get something like this. So paragraph. What if you want an image to go by itself on its own line? Well, you can just put it in a div tag. because remember, div tags are block elements. And you can just put a div around it if you want to do that until we learn how to change the actual properties in CSS that lets us control that. We can use HTML. Right. Now, the reason I pointed that out is in CSS, when you add an image using CSS to the page, it's in the background is a good way to think about it. Okay, and so they've got examples here of this is the image. It's a blue strip with some yellow, and they are tiling it from the top to the bottom. All right, and then over here we have a kind of you probably can't see this on the video, but it's kind of a diagonal lines of yellow and tan, which blends together, and it has kind of a textured look. All right, so let's go ahead and try this out. Oops. And so here's the CSS rule. It's called, or the property is called background image. The value is going to be this URL function, and then inside of that you put the name of the file, because nothing can be simple, right? You have to add an extra little step. So it's always going to look like, well, let me just copy the rule over, and then we'll manipulate it, and I'm going to use embedded. So what does that mean? If I'm using embedded CSS, what am I going to need for that? If I can get my touchpad to cooperate here. I'm trying to zoom out right now, and it's just zooming in farther. Okay, there we go. Promise I've used a computer before today. All right, so I want to be able to see the code, and we'll just actually load this in another page as we go, also so we can see it. Okay, so to use embedded CSS that will affect one entire page, we need in the head section an opening and closing style tag, and then the CSS that goes between them. All right, and we'll just fix this up. There we go. Okay, we don't have an image called background1.gif, so we're gonna have to fall back on one of these other images. Let's try the cake. All right, and let's see what that looks like. A regular sized web page. All right. That's a lot of cake. Now, looking at this, what kind of problems do you think there would be using this image as a background? Okay. Why don't you try reading the page to me here? So, just because you can use an image as a background doesn't mean you should, and not every image is going to be a good background image. All right, and then the other thing is, you'll notice by default it's tiling it, which means it's going vertically across the screen and horizontally. Let's go back. Let's try a different one. Now it looks like my drive to and from work, with the corn blowing in the wind, waving at me as I drive by. Wow, this is kind of hypnotic. Anyway, also probably not a good background image unless you know the goal of your site is to creep people out. Let's try the last one, and then maybe we'll look for something that makes more sense. So I'm just changing the file name here. So you can use whichever one you have access to. All right. Well, we can see that image is a lot larger than the other one, so you don't see quite as many in the screen, but since we are using black text and the background of this image is black, you just can't see the text at all. So anyway, it should be fairly common sense as to what images are good and what aren't. And it really depends on the situation too, but you always want to have contrast, the maximum amount of contrast possible between text and the background of the text. So you want a background that's going to be either all dark or all light, or you can actually put, if you want to use a background like this, let's say I really do want to use corny as my background on my body, I can use a different background for the information on the page by putting it, this is just like the centering thing, we put a div around everything in the body. So that means we put an opening div tag before the body open, or after the body opens, and put the closing one before the body closes. So let's see what that looks like if I format. Okay. And then I'm going to give this a class of text bg. And then here I'll create a rule, so it's a class. I got to do dot text bg, not a comma. Okay. How many times am I going to hit comma? And then for the rules, we can set the background image. Actually, we'll just set a background color for this one. And maybe we want something corn related, so maybe a pastel green or something. So I can use I put in a color, I think this is white, yeah, this is white. It's not gonna let me do it in this file, is it? Well, we can just throw this back in here. So if you put it in the CSS file, it'll give you this little color selector. So if you select the color here and highlight over it, you get this. So I want kind of a pastel-ish green, something that I'll be able to read black text on. So I'll choose that, and I can copy that value back to my embedded CSS. I like how the entire time this file has been trying to load. I don't know what it's doing. We want to get rid of it though. There we go. So one more time, try to copy this and paste it here. And then we get something like this. Alright, so then I can still use my terrible dancing corn background, and I can still read the text because I just put a separate background around the text. Right. Now what else can you do with background image? Well, you can use another property called background repeat, to adjust how the image is displayed on the page. So let's say I only want the dancing corn along the left side of the page. I can set my background repeat to repeat-y. So let's see what that looks like. And so you need to put it in the same rule that you want to change the background of. So since this is the one that's changing the corn, dancing corn background, I can do background dash repeat, and we can set repeat y. Now why is it y? There's repeat y and repeat x. So repeat y is along the y-axis, which is the vertical. Okay, so now I only have the corn along the left. And if I do something like that, I could fill the rest of the space with some color. Just go all in on the corn themed web page. So if we do that, okay, that's one way we could do it. Or maybe we want it to dance along the top. All right. Or if you do XY, it'll do both, but that's the default. There's one more. If we do no repeat, it'll only use one copy. In the top left by default. I'm gonna take off the dancing corn here because that might be confusing this whole time. Okay, so, and I'm gonna take this text BG off. That's blocking our view of the dancing corn. Okay, so one more time. No repeat is one in the top left. And the other thing about this is you can't interact with it when it's CSS. So I can select the text, but I can't do anything to this image back here. All right. And then if I do repeat X, this one was kind of hard to see earlier, it'll just go along the top, right? Okay. And so that's how you use, on a very basic level, background images on your web page. Now, the textbook doesn't talk about, and I'm not sure why. Let's look at CSS background image, because I think there's some other interesting ways you can use this. Oh, 2 images. I didn't know you could do that. So it looks like you can layer your images as well. Okay, well, let's see what happens if we put Corny and the cake together. It says, in this example, you just have to separate the values with a comma. All right. So we'll need another one of these. We can put a comma between the values. Change this to cake. And now we can have both corn and cake. There we go. Now that's a terrible background. It's animated and it's so busy you'll never be able to read anything. There's a lot of different ways to learn. Probably the most efficient way is to show someone how to do something correctly. One of the most effective ways is to demonstrate how to do it wrong. And sometimes both is good. Both are good, sorry. All right, what other kind of cool things do we have? We have this idea of a hero image. All right, so this is set up to use an image as a background in the center of the page. So let's try this. And so the rule is just a class called hero image. So we could just put the code in here and then throw that on whatever we want. So let's add that as a new rule here. I don't think, oh good. All right, so let's say we want to use the Illinois map as our hero image. So all we have to do is put a div in the page and give it this class, I believe. Let's put it, I don't think it, no, I have to do it to the body, I think. Here, one cool thing about this site in particular, the W3 Schools, is you can just click try it yourself and it will show you what it's doing. All right, so they put the hero image, yes, on a div inside of the page. So this is actually an example of something fairly useful in making your website look more modern. All right, and what are we, oh yeah, we were using the map. And so what this looks like is that doesn't work very well, does it? One copy of the image, and it's adjusted to fit a container that's 500 pixels high. Let's try this. I'm not sure if you can do this. Doesn't look like it. Cannot use 100% for height. I think you can use it for width though. Since a web page can scroll. It's weird. Let's make it something we can see on the page. I think also because since this isn't a square image, that's why it's cutting off part of it. Let's see. I wonder if I just broke it. Now it doesn't seem to be working at all. But it was with 500 for some reason. Well, now I want to figure out why it's not working. So we go back. I'm just going to start undoing. See what I did. Okay, there it is back. So let's try 100. put in corny in here. There we go. Whoops, it's way too high. All right, we'll try 1200. And when we look at the page here, let's try 700. All right, so I'm hoping you guys realize, you know, so this would be good if it wasn't a dancing corn picture. If it was something like the example they used here. All right, so let's find our own picture here. Okay. All right. Oh, that's a nightmare. Here we go. Here we go. Look at this guy. He's a hero. Okay, we'll save this image. We'll upload it to Replit. Upload file. And here he is. The name's kind of terrible, so I'm going to cut it down so that to GP for Game Programmer. And we can put that in our hero image. And then it might be less nightmare inducing than this. There we go. Now the image was a lower resolution, and so here we're kind of blowing it up so it highlights the low resolution here. It's kind of pixelated. It probably looks fine on the screen. So anyway, they were also using this background size and background position properties. So if you want to mess around with those, you can look those up. They are not gone over in the material. But if this is something, if HTML and CSS is something that you want to know and be able to use, just understand, just like a regular language, new words and grammar are being added. I guess grammar doesn't really change. Can you think of any examples of new grammar in the English language? Yeah. Anyway, we had new words. So I guess that's a little bit different. we could potentially see new grammar. Usually, we're in HTML5 right now, so potentially in 6 we might see some new stuff, but we're just learning new words and what they do or what they mean. And never going to learn them all, or it would be a waste of time to memorize them all. At least all you need to know is how to figure it out. So that's why you use Google or your preferred search engine, I guess. Ask Jeeves, Netscape, Navigator, I think that was a browser, AOL, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so that's images. Now let's look at, and you'll notice I'm skipping over some of this stuff. We're picking and choosing what's worth learning. All right, this one's pretty cool actually. So the idea of a favorites icon or fave icon or favicon and this is useful to keep track of different websites and things, and also it's a marketing tool kind of. But if you look at the top of my browser bar here, and you probably have to get out your opera glasses or your magnifying glass to see this, or you could just open, if you have a browser, open it and look, visit some different websites. In the tabs, not only is there text, which comes from the title element, right? But there is a little icon or a picture next to it. Well, how does that get there? Well, and what is it for? So we can see it's just another way to represent a website, so that users, when you save in Chrome anyway, when you save a bookmark, it includes the fave icon. So if these were all just text shortcuts at the top of my browser, I would probably have to read them quite a bit to find what I want quickly. But if it's a picture, I can differentiate it pretty quickly. Okay, so let's put a fave icon on our site, and I think you could, I don't know, I think you can do this in Replit. I can't remember if I've actually done this or not. Okay, so we'll use Corny as our fave icon. Let's try to just name it fave icon. See what that does. And so to be able to test this, you do have to load it in a different tab, which the button for that is right up here in this little preview window. That'll open it in a new window. Okay. And so I'm not sure how to do this in Replit, so we'll just look it up. Fave icon in Replit. You might not be able to do it. Alright, the file needs to be named faveicon.ico, and you have to put a / in front of it. Okay. We'll try that. So we need a rename, and we'll put /.ico, and it says file names cannot include /, so that didn't work. Let's just try faveicon.ico. Okay, and now let's try it. So do that, and now we try it in a new tab. Sometimes, due to the way the internet works, yeah, if it's not showing up for you in Chrome, if you hold Control and press F5, it'll refresh the page and pull any new information. And so you'll just have to take my word on it because this is tiny. There's Corny is up in the fave icon. Fave icons don't dance though, so he's just standing there. I'm gonna hit Windows key print screen. Okay, that saves a picture of my screen into my pictures folder, and then I can go, it's under screenshots. I can open the picture, and then here I can zoom in and show you where it's supposed to be, maybe. There he is. So up in the tab, you can control the icon that shows up there. And so if I bookmarked this page, and so I could just hit this in Chrome, there's a star there, or you can click and drag this lock down onto the bar, and it'll use that icon from the page. It also uses the title from the page as the name. So these are just tools to help people use your site. And again, if you're into marketing, you can use a logo here. A lot of times logos are complicated, too complicated to be used as a fave icon. So you may need to create a simplified logo, something that's easier to see. Trying to see if any of these. Because if you're a large company, brand recognition is really important. So you don't want to be misrepresented by your fave icon, right? Okay. Now let's look at. So this is just kind of a side thing. I'm not going to test you on this or ask you to do this in an exercise. It's just really good information to know. And again, when I show you stuff like this, it's because when you get to a job interview and you show a portfolio of work, if you have the knowledge to include details like this and why you're including them, it really looks good and people can see that you're thorough and knowledgeable. All right. In an interview, you're going to speak for yourself, but you can also have your work speak for you. And so you want to present work that you're proud of and that's complete and that paints you in a good light, right? Any kind of a technical job like this, you could be competing with people, with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, but if they don't know how to do something that you know how to do, it could mean the difference between getting the job. So that's why I show you, more detail about these things, but I'm not going to test you on it. Okay. I'd shown before that you can, I think there was a question back here. Somewhere about if you can use CSS to draw things, and then I showed you my orange, or my apple that looked like an orange, or maybe it was an orange that looked like an apple that I had drawn using CSS. Well, when I made the orange or apple, I used rounded edges. How did I do that? Well, you just have to use this new CSS property, new to you guys. It's called border radius. And it allows you to round the edges of a border. So you can see here, these rectangles have rounded edges. So I can show you a couple examples here. So another thing, if you're paying close attention, you'll notice that I'm using tab groups in Chrome, which is a beta feature. So if you look up tab groups in Chrome, you can also use these, but it really helps me. If you go back to my videos, I have so many tabs open, and I only want to keep the ones open that are important, because with the internet and hyperlinks, you can go down a rabbit hole and just open a million tabs. Maybe it's just a problem I have, but if I put these important ones in this group, I don't need the rest of these. I can just right click on a tab and do close tabs to the right. All right, and now I know I only have the stuff I need, and then actually I don't really need this anymore. You can also hit Control W on the keyboard to close a tab. Okay, and you can hit Control T to open a new tab. And let's say, whoops, I closed a tab that I needed. I know it was something I needed, but I have no idea what it was. You can hold Control and Shift and press T, and it will open up the last closed tab that you closed. And you can do it again, and again, and again, and open everything that you closed. So it's kind of a shortcut to just reopen things from your history. You can just open the history and click on what you want, but then you have to click so many more times. All right. Let's look at border radius. And I think, I'm just going to create a new REPL for this because this one turned into a mess. Right. There we go. And so I'm just going to get rid of the script tag here. I'm just going to put some divs in here. We'll make 3 of them. All right, and I'll use embedded CSS again. So in the head section, you put an open and close style tag. I heard that. Okay. And we'll create 3 classes. We'll create one called box1. And we'll give it a border. And remember how to use borders, right? You need a thickness, we'll go 3px, a style, we'll go solid, and a color, green. Okay, and then I will make a couple more of these, and we'll call them box 2 and box 3. Okay, so I have 3 classes that do the same thing right now, and I have 3 divs. I'm going to put each class on each div. So put 1 class on each of the divs. Class equals box 1, and then I don't have to type that again, so I can just come down here, add that attribute into these other ones. And 3. All right, let's see what happens. All right, we have 3 boxes over here. They are stretched across the screen right now, so they don't really look like boxes. So let's give them some dimensions. We'll make them 100 by 100 boxes. 100 pixels. Let's see if that works for the first one. All right, and so we can copy this down into the others. Right, so there we go. But there's not much space between them right now. Right, it kind of looks like a comic strip or a photo strip. Let's put some space between them, but let's just use another element that we looked at, the HR. Do you remember what that does? I'm going to put an HR between the boxes. There we go. It's a horizontal rule or a horizontal line. Now we can see them separated easily. Now let's try adding some border radius to these boxes and see how that affects it. I should have just closed this a long time ago. Okay. So on the first box, we'll set a border radius of 15 pixels. On box 2, we'll use 50 pixels. And on box 3, we'll go 1,000 pixels. All right. So now they're not really boxes anymore. We have a square with rounded corners. We have this almost a circle. I'm going to change this one to 40. All right, so a box with even more rounded edges, and then here is a square with the maximum amount of rounded edges. You may have seen them before. They're called circles. All right, so this is how you create a circle in CSS, and you could put some background color in there. You could put text in there. You could leave it blank. You can stack these together. We don't know how to do that yet, but we'll see that in chapter 6. But how? So obviously, you know, I've shown you here, lower numbers are less rounded, higher numbers are more rounded. But what does this mean? Why does 15 pixels look like this and 40 pixels look like this? Well, what border radius is well, what's a radius? That is half the diameter of a circle, or if you draw a straight line from the center of a circle to any of the outside edges, that is the radius. Okay, so what this is, the way you can interpret this is, starting from the top left corner, you are going to move in 15 pixels. Okay, so I think I can. So top left corner of the square, go in 15 pixels horizontally and vertically, and then you just draw the curve between those points. So here, the reason this one isn't as curved is because it's only going 15 pixels in, then starting the curve. This one's going 40 pixels in and then curving. And then, I don't know if you know this or not, well, you should, because we set this div to only be 100 by 100 pixels. So if we use 1000, it's just going to go all the way to the midpoint and curve it there. So this should, I believe this would be the same as if we just did 100. See if it changes at all. Nope. Okay. And if we do 51 versus 100, can't tell if that's different. Let's try 80. So basically anything over double the width is going to have this effect. Now here we're only using squares, so let's create a rectangle. Okay. So we'll call this rectangle 1. And so a square is a rectangle, but we want something that's a rectangle that isn't a square. So how do we do that? What is a square? A square is a rectangle that has equal lengths on all 4 sides. If we want it to be a rectangle but not a square, we just have to break that rule. So it has to have 4 sides, but they don't have to be the same value. So let's change the width to 200. Okay, and we'll just change this first box to rectangle 1. Okay, so we can see how that affects it. We were using border radius of 80 on there, so let's try 20. Okay, and then let's try 1000 again. All right, so you can't make a circle out of a rectangle in CSS unless it's a square. But you can create this kind of pill shape here. And so with border radius, we can adjust the roundness there. And so that, if you look back at the example where we were drawing with CSS, where I just drew a box within a box, we can now use not only boxes, but boxes with rounded edges, including circles, if we want to draw something with CSS. All right, just like with padding and border, you can affect the different sides differently by putting 4 values. Now, since you're affecting the corners, in this case, it doesn't make sense to think of it as top, right, bottom, and left. But you have to think of it as the corners. So here, we're starting at the top left. Now if you continue on and you study more programming or work with any kind of programming that deals with a screen, things are going to usually start from the top left. Right? Now, if you're used to algebra or graphing things, you usually start in the bottom left, which is a tricky change to make. But anyway, in this case, we're starting in the top left. So here, this one is the 15 pixel border radius. Then over here's the 30, here's the 100, and here's the 5. So it looks kind of like a wing. Really, really long wing. But you can use this to make different shapes. All right, now the next 2 things I'm going to show you, and I think, yeah, I am going to show you these next 2 because you'll need them for the homework, but you can add shadows basically, and we do that using the box shadow property, and you can also do it to text using the text shadow, and the values you use are the same for this. So I can show you an example of those, and then we should be good for chapter 4. All right, so I'm going to do another new one here. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to use this. So let's just put a shadow on our circle down here, which was box 3. So we just need to put box dash shadow. And then you have to give it 3 numerical measurement values to calculate where to put the shadow and how blurry to make it. And then you have to give it a color. So shadows are usually gray, so I'll just use that for this. But I'm going to do 5px, 5px, 5px. Now I'll tell you what these mean in a second. And then we'll just put gray. And then down here now, the box has a shadow. Well, I guess the circle, box 3, has a shadow here. And it makes it look kind of raised off the page. Okay, so what are these numbers? First one, this is your, well, the first two are your offsets of the shadow. So if I change the first one to 10, take a look at the shadow, what happens? Okay, let me change it again. We'll go to 20 this time. So this is your horizontal offset value. If you make it a higher positive number, it'll increase, or it'll move it to the right. If you make it a negative number, it'll go to the left. And then the next number here is your vertical offset. So this is moving it up and down. So let's do -5. This last one is kind of like border radius in that it calculates out how far into the shadow do you want to combine the colors of the shadow with the background. And so luckily this is all done for us, but if you, all this is doing is it's actually just drawing a copy of the container that it's a shadow of, and so it's just another circle back here. But what the browser is doing is it's determining what color to make the circle at different points by combining the color you gave it, which I gave it gray, with whatever color is behind it. So this is white. So you can see it kind of becomes a gradient from white to gray, which makes it look more like a shadow. So if you turn this number up, you're going to have more area being converted, or the colors combined. So I change it to 100. Now look, the shadow is much more kind of, it's almost just like a very thin fog or smoke. So let's go back to, let's go back to 5 so you can see, remember what it looked like. Okay, and then let's go to 10. See what that looks like. So it just kind of softens the shadow more. And you don't have to use gray. It's just the only color that I've seen used that makes sense. You can do red. It doesn't really look like a shadow anymore when you use red, but you can do it if you need it. Kind of looks like a sunrise. If we gave box 3 a background color, this. See, this is the color I'm thinking of. There, now it's the sunrise. We're on the moon looking at the earth, and the sun is rising on earth. There you go. That's where you might use this. A different color. What about black? How does that look? Black's not too bad of a shadow. But it really depends also what color you're using as a background. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. There's just worse and better answers when you're choosing colors and designs and things. Different things fit different situations. Okay. So I don't really need to say much about the text part. It's the same, except it goes around text. Let's add some text on the page. And I'm not going to use a paragraph. Let's use an H1 because we want to be able to see the shadow well. And so let's make some big text. Shadow me. All right, I will. So I can just make a rule. It's an H1, so I can just make an H1 rule that sets the box shadow. And let's go 3. Let's just go 3. And we use gray. Oh, whoops. Not box shadow, text shadow. I was like, why is it putting it around the box? Because it's box shadow. If we want it around the text, we put it in the text shadow property. Okay. So there you go, shadow. One thing with this is if you don't do it right, it can just make the... I wouldn't do this for text that people are going to be, like bodies of text that people are going to be reading. Unfortunately, it just kind of makes it harder to read. But you do need to demonstrate they can use it in the exercises. So don't just forget. Okay, I think that is everything that I'm going to test you on or ask you to know. Now, there is one last thing here. It has to do with opacity. And I think we can demonstrate this fine with a previous example of the hero image. So let's go back to that. All right, because remember we had this nightmare of a website up, and so, you know, I took the time to make this cake image, but you can't really see it. So maybe I want to make my hero image transparent, partially transparent. Well, we can change the transparency by using the opacity CSS property. So I'm going to go into the class here. I'm going to put it at the top so you can see where we are. This is the class rule for the hero image. So that's what's putting this in the middle of the page. So opacity, or how opaque something is the opacity and transparency are just two sides of the same coin. If something is more opaque, it lets less light through. If something is more transparent or less opaque, it lets more light through. So, and this is measured in percent. So you have to use the, if you do 1, that's 100%. If you do 0, that's 0%. So if it's by default, it's 1. There's no transparency. If you set it to 0, what do you think will happen? It's there, it's just invisible. That's not very useful, right? So let's just cut the difference. 0.5, it's 50% transparency. And now you can see, oh, what's going on there? Now you can see the background. It's totally unreadable now, but we can make it transparent. So maybe that's too transparent. So let's bring it back up and we'll go 90%. There we go. So you can see the image. You can see through the image kind of. It's not ideal in terms of design, but it demonstrates how to use this. So, all right. So there's that. Because I think the exercises will ask you to do that. So, and if you need more time on the Chapter 4 exercises, just let me know. Other than that, I'm tired of talking. So I will see you guys next week, and we'll start. Chapter 5 should be quick in terms of how many videos I need to make. I should probably only need to make 1. And it's a lot. Chapter 5 is more about design than it is coding, so we'd get a little break from coding, and then in 6 we'll dive back in. All right, have a good day.